next to another wiener, 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 wiener. What's up, everybody? How's it going? This is NAT3MILL and ChrisCarter on ReelChat on twitch.tv/NAT3MILL. Thanks so much for joining us. What's going on, Chris?
Oh man, I am excited for this one. I know we're both excited for it. I think this is a big deal for us on this one. Book some time, grab some coffee. Let's get into it. Also, thank you for the rendition of the Game of Thrones.
Oh, of course. I have to give props to South Park about that, of course, and my friends when we were watching it, just drilling that into my head for the longest time. And every single time I got PTSD seeing the HBO Max pop up on my screen. But if anybody doesn't know, I'm a huge fan of Game of Thrones, books and the show, and I think we have a new show coming out called It's the House of the Dragon here pretty soon. I think they're in pre-production. It should be coming out next year. But welcome to ReelChat. I'm so excited about this episode. It's one of the biggest ones I've been wanting to think about. Originally, I wasn't even wanting to do a rendition of Game of Thrones, and I think Chris and my father-in-law talked me into watching it again, so here we are.
Here we are. I love it.
So, just to start us off, we're going to be going over the accomplishments of Game of Thrones, what are some of its biggest failures, and Season 8. Probably the lowest rated TV show season for a finale or ending show season I've seen on IMDb across the board with fans and stuff like that too. Yeah. Chris, why don't you go ahead and open us up?
Dude, it's such a broad topic, right? There's so much to cover. We've got almost a decade, I think maybe more than a decade of kind of cultural relevance. I mean, there was a before Game of Thrones and there was an after Game of Thrones. And this really kind of solidified some people's careers. Some of them are one-hit wonders, but it's impossible to deny that this series really put this book. So this book, you read the books then, right, Nate? Because I want to talk about the series, but I want to get the context in the books real quick.
Yeah.
Were the books this popular prior to the series being released?
This popular? No.
Yeah.
I was gonna say the show definitely catapulted this thing into the mainstream. Okay. I would say. And
okay.
Yeah, I'm just gonna take a sip. Okay. This is not mead. Promise.
This is the Phantom coffee cup, by the way, too. Thank you. For me, it was such a big deal, man. Like, I was one of those people, and I want to talk about my personal experience Game of Thrones as kind of this vignette to the bigger story, because it's a huge story. Like, someone like you have its influence, and Jessica, she like the encyclopedia when it comes to some people really just gravitated to that story. And so, I mean, it's a fantastical story to begin with, which is a hard target to hit, right? I mean, it's expensive production-wise. Every costume has to be unique. All the set design, everything is very specific. It's not something you can go into the Warner Brothers or backlog.
No, I mean,
hey, we're going to film this here. So
I agree.
It's expensive.
I mean, the Long Night episode was $20 million. That was $20 million for that episode.
That's crazy. That's wild. That's more than I think. The Mortal Kombat budget that we talked about last week or earlier this week, I think might have been 15.
I was gonna say, put it in perspective. Taken 3 was $48 million to make one whole movie.
Yeah, it's wild, and I think that's a big part of it. But for me personally, I came into Game of Thrones late, man. I was into it. We actually looked into it. I believe it was season 3 that I actually came into. Oh no, season 4. Take that back. The first episode I ever saw was the Mountain and the Viper.
That was your first episode?
That was my first episode. I had no context coming into it before that.
Wow.
I know. It's crazy. So it's funny. We talk about, like, these moments of time, right? And so you and I remember Overwatch well because I know that's when you met your wife. And you and I would talk about that. So, like, for me, that's like that window. Like, I knew Nate when he met his wife. And that's and we were part of this thing.
You were in my wedding. So,
which also was a Game of Thrones themed wedding, right?
Yeah.
Or had elements of Game
we were hand fasted, which was a Celtic tradition, and we even had my best man wore the hand of the king pin and stuff. And then we had photos. I mean, if you can't tell, I have the swords like everywhere. I mean, long claw right here, And my wife wanted ice, which was Eddard Stark's sword, and that's hanging in our bedroom as well too.
See, and that's so cool. I think the way that show influenced people's lives, kind of, it's a big deal. So again, for me, I was first dating my current girlfriend, and so she's like, hey, let's watch this TV show. I'm like, cool, what is it? I had no interest. I had no interest in it. Like, to me, that wasn't something that resonated with me on my level. Where it's like, a fantasy story with swords and dragons. Like, where's the reality of it? They're swearing, but how could they be swearing when like conjecture hasn't been made until thousands of years? Like, so there are all these things that I had to get over. But once I did, it was, I was one of those people that went back and watched everything in order from that point forward, because it was such a cool experience. But that was my beginning from it. Do you remember your beginning from it?
Yeah.
Your first introduction to Game of Thrones? Were you
I
an
was not
episode
on
one guy?
board. I'm a Tolkien guy. I was originally not on board.
Okay.
I didn't start watching the show until the night before the premiere of season 2.
Oh, really?
My good friend Josh, he came over. I was hanging out with some friends and stuff like that too. I was at their house, and he's like, "Hey, you watch Game of Thrones? I know you're into medieval and fantasy and all that stuff." I'm like, "Nah, dude. It seems like it's the Sopranos with swords. It doesn't seem interesting to me at all." I was like, "It's just a bunch of talking." He's like, "No, I think you might actually be interested in the political intrigue and the backstabbing and stuff like that too." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, yeah, "I'm gonna bring over the first season. We're gonna watch the first episode of it." I'm like, "Okay, cool. Put it on." Sean Bean shows up on screen, so I'm like, "So he's gonna die." 100%.
Because he dies in everything.
So he's like, "Okay, watch the first episode." Intrigued. Love it. I was immediately hooked on to Jaime Lannister as my favorite character. Immediately. He comes back the next day, and he's like, "Hey, I'm going to go watch season 2 with my friends. What'd you think of the show?" I'm like, "Dude, I binge watched the whole season. You're not going anywhere. Let's put on season 2." And it took off. And for me personally, it was huge. I really loved it. I thought it would deserve a better ending than it got. But my circle of friends, we literally would meet. I made sure every Sunday when the show was live. At the very end, I think I had probably 16 people in my house, including my brother Samson. It was
I remember.
Rachel.
I got a couple of those invites too. I wasn't able to go because I was at my own one with Jessica, but that was popular. Right? Game of Thrones made that popular. So yeah, continue.
Yeah, it's just it kept my friends together and stuff like that, and we just constantly just talked about it. I would discuss and debate the show versus the books with my buddy Josh Rodriguez, Jeremy, and stuff like that too. I remember one time during the Red Wedding, we're sitting there, we're introducing Jack to the show finally, and we're watching it, and it's the Red Wedding episode, and Josh pauses it. And he goes, "Hey, Jack, who's your favorite character?" He's like, "Oh, I like Rob, man. He's going to take it all the way. He's going to get it." And he's like, "Okay, cool. Watch what happens." And it was so funny. That show broke so much ground on just moving from the aspect of being mainstream. A lot of people weren't interested in the show originally. They thought it was going to tank, like most medieval and fantasy shows do. They don't meet it up with the CGI or the believability or the character development and stuff like that too, or the writing. We'll get into that. Yeah. But it got huge by episodes like season 2 or 3. Everybody wanted to be involved in it. Season 1, not really a lot. And quite frankly, for a show to tank so bad on its pilot episode, have you seen the pilot episode? It's horrible, by the way. The first one that they had, which originally had Tamsin Merchant playing Daenerys, a bunch of other people as well involved too. Before they had Emilia Clarke and everything else. Before they even had Jason Momoa as Drogo. It was crazy.
Which made his career too. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it really did.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it did. I was gonna say Baywatch kind of made his career, but that's just. But
I don't think Baywatch made it anybody's
career. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Anyway, let's get into it, man. I want to hear. Here we go. I got a huge list, and I know we have some people that want to voice their opinions as well too. In chat, if you're watching, please. Talk to us what got you into Game of Thrones. We'd love to hear from you as well too and hear your point of views. Chris, let's go over your accomplishments for the show first.
Well, I think they did a lot of things well. Like, obviously, you don't get as many Emmy awards and nominations as they did by doing things wrong. So, I think I think you're right. Season 1 wasn't wonderful, although it wasn't bad. But for me, what my favorite thing about the show is they made characters on opposite sides that you cared about. And my favorite episode, which I want to ask yours, and I don't want to linger on that part of it too much, is Spoils of War. That's season 7, episode 4.
Okay, guys, spoilers alerts are out the window. It's been 10 years since the first season. Okay.
Yeah, it's happening, guys. And that's the one where we have Jaime and Daenerys on the battlefield at the same time. And what I really enjoyed watching is
I watched that episode last night.
Oh, that's my. If you watch this morning, I still love it. what we enjoy watching is the after talk with GB and David, the two creators, and they talked about one of the things that we hadn't seen prior to this is you had two characters that you were actively rooting for. You had Jamie and Daenerys that were on opposite sides of the battlefield, and that made me uncomfortable because at some point there's gonna coming to a head where one of these characters is probably going to die, and so you spent 6 seasons, and that's probably almost 7.5 years with these characters, and so you worry about them.
I don't think they will make a show,
especially with Jamie's turn. I mean, you said
I don't think they're gonna make a show.
He was an asshole for the most part of season 1, so for them to turn and to make him very, very likable was a great. People will talk about the writing, but that was good writing. They did something very special with them. They meet a lot of people that you didn't like into like what we like you mentioned Khal Drogo. That was one of those people or one of those characters that they did a good job about. And granted, it was Daenerys and him, but at the same time, he wasn't a likable character at first. That wasn't his shtick. What they did well, in my opinion, is they created big bads. They created the best big bads in a series that I can ever think. Can't think of anything better. I'm going down my list here, right? I made this before you started talking. You got Joffrey, who everybody hated. When Joffrey died, people cheered. Like, I was at a party or a watch party when he died. People loved it because the guy,
oh, for sure. If nobody cheered through that, you're a sadist as much as he is.
Yeah, it's like, come the fuck on. So they did. So we have Joffrey, we have Littlefinger. Everybody, Littlefinger was rarely likable. I can see some people kind of digging him, but I think he was a big bad. Tywin, who was a great big bad. I think that
he's the best.
His philosophy, right? See, okay. Do you think he's the? I'm going to ask you that in a second. I'm going to come back to this point. I'm going to asterisk my note there. Ramsay, who tortured Theon for 3 seasons, and then it got the best ranked episode of all time, Battle of the Bastards, and he's kind of at the head of that. So he was considered obviously a big bad by the audience. And then Stannis and Melisandre, the Red Woman, who convinces Stannis to burn his daughter alive after, we have that touching moment with, I can't think of him. Come on, help me, Nate. The guy who's got no fingers. They cut off his fingers. He serves, thank you very much. They have that touching moment, and then, he's convinced to burn his daughter alive. And then, we have Cersei, who, it's funny. I tell Jessica, I identify Cersei to me like, hey, she's a mother watching after her kids. And even the creators going into season 8, they had said it was once that all of her kids have died and moved on, then she's just living for herself, and that's when Cersei becomes evil and dangerous. And so, I love.
You're bringing up so many facts of the failures that I want to talk about.
Well, okay, great, because I will dispute that. But I think what they did well is they created these interconnected storylines, and it's just such an interesting point of view to kind of follow these different houses, and they come to crescendos against other houses, and it's just such a fun journey to take because generally you care about at some point all of these houses. I mean, think about it. Tyrion, Peter Dinklage character.
Tyrion.
I always get Tywin and Tyrion. I always
Tyrion and Tywin.
Tyrion, thank you. To me, he was the most likable character in the whole series, and he didn't start that way. He was kind of, he was kind of just a piece of shit, and but look where they got him, and look where they got Jamie. You know what I mean? I think that just the journeys that we have with these characters. I'm rambling now, but I'm gonna get to you. I'm gonna stop talking.
No, that's cool.
What were some of the successes?
Well, let's
GOT did for you.
No problem. Let's get into it. So, in my opinion, what makes a good show, right? A well-based show. Dialogue, pacing, efficiency of storytelling, and relatable characters. Now, I'm going to give props to George R. R. Martin, who in my opinion is still one of the best science fiction writers of our time, but also one of the laziest writers of our time. Okay? So, Game of Thrones, Game of Thrones has changed the world when your phone knows the word Targaryen when you're trying to type it out. Okay? So let's just put that right there.
That's a great point.
The accomplishments of the show. It changed the world and the future for TV from the transition from books to TV. Okay? You've got Amazon making its Lord of the Rings show right now. Also, Amazon's also coming out with another show, Wheel of Time, which I'm really a huge fan of as well too. It's a great show series, book series. Sorry. Now, the first thought about the show is it makes you guess who the villain is. The first season was a masterpiece because not only was it a storytelling about political intrigue and action behind that whole thing, but it's actually a mystery show in the very beginning. You don't know who the bad guy really is. You think it's Jamie, but he actually turns out to be the biggest hero of the show. If you think about what his past is and what he did with all the, stuff he did in the past with killing the Mad King. Going into that itself, Jamie was my favorite character in the books and the show. And I got a lot of crap for that. But if you look at it, he's the only one throughout the show that constantly does stuff for other people that is against himself or those that he considers that he loves. He saves, King's Landing in the very beginning. He does constant stuff for Brienne as he goes along and loses his hand in the process. Right. He does stuff for Tyrion and stuff like that. That character was the embodiment of a self-sacrificing character. So, accomplishments, the only two characters I feel that got a beginning, middle, and end were Theon and Jorah's characters' arcs were probably the best in the series. Theon's especially, going throughout. I think they did those characters justice. Probably only those characters justice as they went along. Just going down my list, the only good episode, only good scene in season 8 that I consider a good scene was the wine and chill scene in Winterfell, with all the characters like the Avengers getting together and stuff like that too, and just talking and the character development and continuing. Brienne getting knighted and stuff. That whole scene was just so good. It wasn't just fan service or something like that. It was very, very interesting. I really liked that a lot. Now, you talked about favorite episode. It's hard to find a favorite episode in the show. Yeah. My favorite season was season 4. All the main characters, Jon Snow, Daenerys, Jorah, everybody, all the main characters hit their lowest point in that show, which gives them all a turning point to make themselves better. Jon Snow dies at the end. He goes against the code and stuff like that too. Season 4 is the best one because that's when they actually took the books and then they lost the books, but they made that whole show amazing. Like Tyrion, finding out that Shay betrayed him and stuff like that too. And you have Tywin as the best villain in that sense because he's going up against Tyrion and he's just doing all the stuff that you wish he would stop doing to his family and your loved characters.
So season 4 has a lot of what you're talking about, and I was kind of going over that with Jessica earlier, and so if you look at season 4's breakdown, it's got the Lion and the Rose where Joffrey is killed, and you've got the Laws of Gods and Men where Dinklage has that wonderful monologue to Tywin and says the only crime I ever had was being born a dwarf, and he's got that wonderful monologue. And that's 6. And then so after that, you've got 8, 9, and 10. 8 is the Mountain of the Viper, which was wonderful.
Amazing.
9, it was the Watchers on the Wall, which I think you had mentioned to me in passing. That might have been one of your top 5 episodes because that's where we have Jon Snow killing Ygritte. And you just have that great fight. That was that one.
Still my favorite battle in the whole show was the battle on the wall. That's still my favorite.
I'm gonna come back to that. Don't. Well, you've already spoiled it, but we'll come back to that one too. So that episode, and then we have the children to wrap it up when Dinklage kills Tywin, but before that we have that wonderful piece where Jamie breaks out his brother, and you have a brother, I've got brothers, I anybody who has a sibling, there's something innate that you can't speak about, you can't relate to unless you have a sibling. And in that moment when Dinklage knows he's probably going to die, when Jamie breaks him out, and it's just like they have that very touching moment between brothers. I think that's so good. And then Dinklage has his chance to leave, right? He knows where to go, and he stops, and then he goes back to kill his father. And I think that was you got it. Yeah, they did some things wrong, and I know you have loads of ammunition for that, and we'll get to that. But they did a lot right too, and I think season 4, if you look at it, these are great pieces of work. So I think that the journey between Dinklage's character and Jamie's character, and I think that you have in John at this point, Ygritte's storyline wraps up, and she dies, or he passes, and John's holding her, and that's that's such an emotional point. So we have these last 3 episodes of season 4, and I think at that point, Game of Thrones, that might have been the best season of Game of
It
Thrones.
is the best season. It is.
So you
Season
think that's
4
the best season?
is the best
Okay.
season. That's where they start. That's where they stop. That's where the books pretty much end. Some of the character journeys kind of lead into the other seasons and stuff like that from there as well too. But that's where they lost the blueprint, and that's the decline of the show, in my opinion. After season 4,
I was going to ask you. So is that where they lose the books in season 4? Going into season 5?
To put it this way, the last time you saw Daenerys, she was on Drogo, flying out of the arena for Marine. The last time you saw Tyrion, he's actually in the army outside of Marine that's being engaged. Barristan Selmy is still alive. That was a horrible character process. The way they just killed him in the alleyway, that was dumb. That was horrible. The way they ended that character. The last time you see Jaime, he's up by Riverrun. He just took on a Riverrun, and there's like no love between him and Cersei in the books at all at that point. She is actually being held in the Sept as well, and she actually wrote to Jaime saying, "Come and help me. I need you to stand as my champion," or something like that too. And he takes the scroll and burns it. There's no love between them at that point.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Jon has just been stabbed, and the last time we heard, the last sentence he says is "Ghost to me," because not only can Bran warg, but all the Stark children can warg as well too.
And
Arya,
so for people that don't know, what is warging? For
warging
people that don't know, what is
basically going into animals, seeing through animals, and taking control of them. The Stark children can do that to all their wolves. Arya can even do it in a cat. She's in the House of Black and White, learning to be a faceless man, and she's able to warg into the eyes of the cat when she's blind, and that's how she's able to see. Mm-hmm. So, the show lost a lot of its subplots and its core values after they lost the books, and that's the problem. That's one of the biggest failures. Is that, in my opinion, David and Dan, who I will now, from now on, the rest of the podcast, be calling them Dumb and Dumber. They do not know how to create. They do not know how to write. They know how to adapt.
Well, they weren't writers, though. But they weren't the writers.
Yeah, the last 2 seasons, season 7 and season 6, no, season 7, season 8, they wrote the bulk of those episodes.
Well, as they are the showrunners, so they will have oversight out of everything. So they know it's their ass if it doesn't land. So, well, I don't know. I didn't see them credited as writers. I'm sure they did. I'm sure they wrote some of it. But even then, it's like, I mean,
the way that
we'll get to season 8 because I think that there's a lot to discuss there.
That's gonna be huge. The reason why they got the rights to the show is they met with George R. Martin. They were in a cafe, and George R. Martin said, "Okay, cool. I like your points. I like where you want to take this. Who do you think Jon Snow's mom is?"
And they got it right.
They came back 48 hours later, and they said it was Lyanna Stark, Rhaegar Targaryen, and they got the rights to the show. And the fact they didn't use any of that later on, it pisses me off, but we'll get into that as well too. But
they did use a little bit of it, right?
Kind of, not enough.
Yeah, but it wasn't a story about that. Like, it wasn't. They rarely showed events because there were more interesting things that they could have shown from that, like the Mad King part of it. There were other things in in the end, and this is credit to George Martin. He created such a layered and diverse storyboard, to talk about all of these things that happened prior to what we're seeing and build into the lore and storyline of what these characters know and talk about but we don't see. It's wonderful. It's great world building. We talk about that a lot, especially during sci-fi shows. If you can build a convincing world, and I think you have said this too, you have to set your rules, and once you set your rules, okay, I'm along for the ride, and he did a wonderful job doing that.
Let's put it this way, talking about the writers and stuff like that too. They did write a lot of the episodes, and they wrote the bulk of season 7 and 8. So I will give them props because that's how they tried getting into, as Medea 2 says right here, they lost their Star Wars and their Netflix deal, which they still currently have at $200 million, which is stupid, because they are bad writers. Their dialogue is crap. The first scene of season 8 is Tyrion and Varys talking about dick jokes. Like, come on. Yeah. It was horrible. Yeah. They pitched really their first pitch after, like, during season 8 was about a Confederate timeline where slaves were still around, and they got trashed on because of it. Who wants that kind of show? Especially in this day and age. That was horrible. They didn't even show... Oh, sorry.
So no. So let me stop you. So real quick, the Star Wars one was kind of a sham. I kind of thought that to begin. But if you know about Kathleen Kennedy, who runs Lucasfilm, there have been issues with creatives who have been kind of pushed out because Star Wars is basically a machine, right? You have to fit this circular vision in this circular hole. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And it's not going to work on your end, not her end. And that's what happened on Solo. Granted, the directors were young and they were inexperienced, but they were exited because they had different ideas as to what the studio and Kathleen Kennedy specifically, who runs Lucasfilm, had in mind. Now, granted, she's an EP. She can have that opinion, absolutely. However, it's not stretched to be like, hey, this person is difficult to work with. So the fact that these were two creators with their own idea, wanting to bring something into the Star Wars universe, was never going to work. I don't know why they didn't know that. Maybe they just, it's like Ari Gold says, you got to book your next job before your last job comes out. Right?
I will never watch anything those guys write ever again.
But the Confederate one got picked up. The HBO gave them that deal, and it was an alternate timeline, which also, granted, I see your point. It is maybe the optics of it now look bad, but also The Man in High Castle, which also was a book, that was produced by Amazon, and that was where the Nazis won World War II, and they were still burning disabled people and Jewish people, and there was that. So we have different but I agree with you. I'm not saying I disagree with you. I'm just saying in the creative arena that alternate timelines, like again, Handmaid's Tale, that's a wonderful current example too, can exist if done properly. So that's all I'm saying.
I'm just saying they rushed the show just so they can get other jobs. They said they were burned out, and they even said in an interview they downplayed the fantasy angle of Game of Thrones because they wanted people to be able to relate. You were in the 7th season. People were already on board. It was the biggest fan base on a show to date and at that time. You didn't have to downplay anything. You could have just kept to the source material and the outline that George R. Martin gave you instead of reducing Bran, who was supposed to be the biggest and baddest powerhouse in the show, and they didn't do anything with him. They didn't even show up in Comic-Con 2019 because they were afraid of the backlash.
Shut up! I didn't know that.
They didn't show up. Yeah, they didn't show up. The showrunners didn't show up to the last panel of the season 8 at the end of it, and they got called out by Seth Rogen, who had the podcast, who had the panel in Hall H. Afterwards, like we're after the Game of Thrones. The showrunners didn't even show up. This is horrible. They lost their. Now they have a Netflix deal, and now all of a sudden they're going. The first thing that they did after Game of Thrones is a stand-up comedy with, I can't remember the actress's name, but that was the best. That was the next thing they did after Game of Thrones. They can't write. David Benioff wrote Wolverine X-Men Origins. It was his idea to staple Deadpool's mouth shut. That just tells you what kind of inspiration these guys have.
Well, but let me counter that by saying James Cameron's first film was Piranha 2. So while I understand your point, now you can have growth, and you're right. So maybe the first creative out, and again, I'm not a mark for David or DB, right? Although if they want to hire me, you know where to find me. I would say that they could maybe it helps any writer to have a structure to go off of, sure. And when you kind of have the training wheels taken off, you have to kind of find your balance, right? But that's true for anything. Again, James Cameron, I think he wasn't fired from it, but his first film was Piranha 2. Let's not forget, James Cameron, you know what he directed, but in case people don't, there's a little movie called Avatar that's made the most money in the whole fucking world. So, you have this window to kind of grow. I think these dudes were saddled with very high expectations because they had super high success very early in their career, which let's call it 50-50, right? They did half of it, and they're taking half of it from Martin. And when I say their half of it is production. I'm gonna
agree with you a little bit, but also I'm gonna agree more so with Asmodee, because he says I'd argue they were already far enough along in their field for us to forgive mistakes for season 8. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I mean, I can understand your first film, but you went from Game of Thrones for 8 years of having a blueprint, and then all of a sudden, when the blueprint ends, you don't know what to write. I can't forgive that. I can't take that away. Especially when their excuse for what they did with season 8 is they wanted to downplay the scope. Then you want to go to Star Wars, who has the biggest scope, like a huge freaking following as well too. Come on, I'm gonna say that's just horrible. That's horrible writing. That's horrible at your job. I'll never watch anything else that those guys write. I
won't. I'm gonna remember that because I'm sure people walked out of Piranha 2 saying the same thing.
It's hard to compare. It's hard to compare a fan base of Game of Thrones or Star Wars.
You're right. You're right. Those are the two. I mean, think about it. Game of Thrones and Star Wars might be the two most rabid fan bases that there is out there right now, or ever for that matter.
Let's put it this way: 1.8 million fans asked for a rewrite of season 8. What other show or anything else has ever gone to that length of saying, "Hey, this was horrible. Do it again. Give us what we want."
Well, but you could also make the argument that you've got 1.8 million people saw the show, and that's just people that want to see the rewrite. So you're talking about more people. So they did something right. And you know, I'm ready for this. I'm ready to talk season 8 if you are. I've got some pluses on this. I was going through my notes and reviewing some of it, but I like where we're at right now. I love that you have that point of view because can you imagine being in charge of something as big as Game of Thrones? And granted, yes, you had done it wonderfully for 7 seasons, and then on the last season you kind of dropped the ball. I don't know if that's I don't know, man. Like I don't know if that's their fault or what.
Before we go into like season 8, because I know everybody wants to know what we thought about it and stuff. Sure. Let's talk about we were talking about the accomplishments, and we went off on the writers a little bit, but like you said, the cool thing about the show was that heroes can die. They killed the main protagonist in the first season.
Yeah.
That was huge. Nobody expected that. The red wedding, the purple wedding. Everybody, as it went along, you could see like, oh my gosh, everybody wanted to know who's gonna die this week. That was the biggest thing. That was viral with just wanting to see what was gonna happen to people. But as the show went along, it kind of lost that because then plot armor became this huge thing where nothing happened to any of the main characters as it went along. You know, that's where it lost its core values in the whole process of being this huge, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? And then they kind of lost that and just played this fan service.
Yeah, I love that point. I'm so glad you I didn't even think about that until you said it. That's a wonderful point that they weren't afraid to kill their main characters. And I would run parallel to this with Walking Dead. Because Walking Dead it was a little before Game of Thrones, I think. But what Walking did really well, and I think when people were really involved with it, was they were not afraid to kill main people. They came off that, I think, around season 5 or 6. And that's where, I mean, to me, that's where I fell off. But Game of Thrones, same thing. I love the fact that you didn't know who was going to die at any point. Like, you felt they invested time and emotion into this character. You gravitated towards them, and then they would kill them off. And because of that, I think that's why people kept coming back to it, and we're so invested in it because you're right. They wanted to know who wanted to die, but more than that, you wanted to make sure that your favorite character wasn't the one who died. Like you know what I mean? I think there's a lot of that going on, and at least that was for me. Like I was terrified that Brienne of Tarth was going to die. I'm like, no, I don't want. You know what I mean? She was one of the people that I'm like, and I'm sure there were people that thought Ygritte was not going to die. Like Ygritte's the love interest of our main character. She's going to make it. You know what I mean? So
I read the book, so I knew that wasn't going to be happening.
but right, I had no idea. So for me, that knowledge of the books was totally, external. I still don't know anything about that. So for me, I was just along for the ride. And I think that's the view that I can bring to it, was I have no prior knowledge of it. So I'm just, what you put in front of me is what I see and I would enjoy or not enjoy something. Was there a character that died that you thought was not going to die?
Barristan Selmy.
My God, stand up and say it. My God, I don't think the people...
Okay, here, I'm wearing his shirt right now. That's a Kingsguard shirt. Barristan Selmy had the worst besides Jaime and everybody else later on. He's still alive. He's the only one that's keeping Meereen from going down in the books. Even the actor had interviews like, I thought I was going to stick my teeth into the next season. I have something that's going on and doing. And they kill him. He's the best swordsman in the whole books. They kill him in an alley with these guys that have knives. And the Unsullied become so stupid. They have armor and spears that are at least 8 feet long and shields, and they're dying to people with little freaking daggers this big. Yeah. Dumb. Yeah. Dumb writing.
The was fun. He was fun. But what season did that happen at? When did he die?
Season 5.
So then they were still borrowing the writing from Martin, or was Sir Barristan still alive in the
books? Barristan's still alive in the books.
All right. Well,
yeah. It was horrible.
Well, I don't know why they made that choice.
Nobody does. The actor doesn't even. He he argued with them for like weeks.
But that doesn't mean, honestly, the guy who played Jesus from Walking Dead said that he had been training for months and they killed his character and he didn't see it coming. So, yeah, that's the life of an actor, right? You're an actor. You know how it goes sometimes. Sometimes you think you're going to be around for season 4 and you're killed off at the end of season 1. You're an actor. You know how it goes when it comes to that. But you're right. I enjoyed that character too, and I did not like the end that he had. And there's, and was there a character that lived that you thought was maybe going to die?
Arya.
Do you think Arya was gonna die? People would have rioted. Arya's like Daryl Dixon. I'm not talking about Walking Dead anymore.
She had too much plot armor, dude. She had too much plot armor. No person in the show gets stabbed 3 times, slit in the stomach, and then all of a sudden just walks away from it, and then he's running in the next scene. That whole scene when she gets attacked in Bravos was just, that was horrible. I'm sorry. If she got stabbed once, maybe.
I think George Martin had mentioned that he always knew or knows that Arya was going to kill the Night King, even in his books.
Oh, don't hold on. We're gonna get into season 8. Don't test me.
Okay.
I'm gonna go off. I'm gonna get ahead of me. I'm gonna lose some notes. And I'm gonna rewatch this later on YouTube and be like, oh, I didn't bring that up. Crap.
I thought that Jamie was gonna live. I know it's season 8 shit, but since we're talking about people that we thought that we were gonna live that died, I thought Jamie was gonna live for sure, and I thought at one point Sansa was gonna die for sure. And you know, the fact that got swapped or whatever, and it's like, yeah, I could have lived out Sansa. She wasn't my favorite of the Stark kids, but you know, I really enjoyed Jamie's character arc, and the fact that he went back for his sister. It again, season 8. I'm gonna cut that off and we'll go into it, but yeah, I thought Sansa was gonna die, and I thought Jamie was gonna live, and I would have much rather liked that.
Okay, so we're getting into it because most of my failures have to do with the last couple seasons.
All right, main event time.
Yep.
Let's do it.
Okay. Every single character lost their core values, and we lost all the subplots as you went through season 7 and season 8. Cersei stopped acting like Cersei. In the book, she even considers herself to be Tywin with teats. That's literally what it says in the books. She's supposed to be smart. She's supposed to use cunning and and cat's paws and all this other stuff as well too. She stopped acting like herself when she blew up the Sept of Baelor. And it was not like her. She became a freaking Bond villain at the end of the show and stuff like that too. And then all of a sudden, all that we keep getting from her is drinking wine when she's pregnant, whatever, and doing stuff that doesn't make any sense to her character. She's just looking out windows. We don't get anything. She's not really the villain of the show anymore, in my opinion. The main villain should have been the White Walkers. They were the first thing we see in the first episode in the very beginning. They're supposed to be the big bad. And then the Night King just gets nuked in the first, 3 episodes. The Mountain took longer to kill than the Night King. It was horrible. Dany forgot how to take a city. Number 1. All the way through when she's doing an Essos and taking cities through, getting people into the city and stuff like that too. We already know there's a tunnel because Davos and Tyrion use it in season 7, and Tyrion even talks about Jaime going underneath. She could have just sent the Unsullied in through that same tunnel to take it from the inside. She didn't have to burn it down and do all this stuff. She just forgot how to become a conqueror when she went to Westeros. All the stuff that she was doing originally was working, and she didn't do it.
I disagree on everything you just said.
Okay. Tell me why you disagree before I go to the next point.
I liked that you said it, though, because season 7 is when her last kid was still alive, right? And he face plants after
and there's no reaction from her at the end of that either.
But that's what I think that's what the creator said, that once her only reigning in force, her only kryptonite that kind of kept her in this non-maniacal tube was her kids. And so once she lost all of her kids, then she can become that dictator that the Tywin with tits that you're talking about. You know, then she can do that because she's freed of any type of. And I'm not saying her kids, because she obviously manipulated her kids for her. I'm not saying that she was a saint mother any chance. But I'm saying is that any type of redeeming force was gone. At that point. So on her switch from season 7 to season 8. I feel like it was completely motivated. And
the only reason why it wasn't motivated is because people do stuff in this show, and the reason why we love the show is because people that go after vengeance get punished. There was no consequence to her blowing up the Sept. All of a sudden, the next season, she's getting crowned, and everybody's in there, and the people are in there, and they're not rioting up against her at all. That was stupid. There was nothing that happened from that. She blows it up and everybody's okay with it. She killed not just the people in the Sept, but people in the city, and they didn't rise up from that. There's no payoff from the consequences of her actions for that. Bullshit. I
think what the Red Keep, I forget what city it is, but they don't, that's not their jam. They're not a rise up kind of people. They're a want to be led kind of people, as long as they're fed and they have jobs, which, you know what I mean? It's not a revolution type of area, I don't think. But
what? But they got righted when Joffrey was just starving them originally, and they got attacked. And then they're in the castle, and she's watching him getting crowned, and nothing happens from it. That's what I'm saying. There's no payoff. There's no consequences from her actions from that.
Well, but that the consequence was that she sets them on the path to war, and Jaime even says it. You can't fight two wars. You can't fight the war with Daenerys. You can't fight the war with there's another one too. So you can't be split like
but
that.
Daenerys wasn't even on in Westeros at the time. They were just okay with her becoming queen.
But she was always coming to Westeros. Like, they knew she was always coming. It's just, now they're here. Now she's here. Now she's here. And so to the point when there's like at the doorstep, it's like, you know, the army is on the way. So we have to be ready for this fight. And so at that point, they always understood that.
But everybody knew that from day one. Robert talked about that when people. But I'm saying there's no consequence for her actions. Nothing happened. The writing got shitty at that point because there was no subplots with Cersei. She's just sitting on the throne waiting. They're not making any plans. They don't know how to take the dragons down until the dragons get to Westeros and start burning people. That's what I'm saying. There's no consequences from what she said, what happened. The writing got shitty with her.
I agree.
There's no conflict.
In the frame that you're putting that, I agree. But I would also say that at that point it became Dany's story. But you know, we focused more on Dany's turn because it was her turn. There has to, and I'm not. I want to pivot to that because yes, you are right. I still think there are elements of what I'm saying is right too. But it became Dany's story. I think between season 7 and especially going into 8, it was her story. So we see her turn, right? Her motivation.
Kind of, but if you look at the overall of the story in the show, it's everybody's story. It's not just Dany's story. Everybody has consequences.
Okay, but there's a main story, right? Who's the main character in the story between season 7 through 8?
Jon and Dany. That's why it's called the Book of Fire and Ice. They're supposed to be fire and ice together. So that's the whole point. So, Song of Fire and Ice was the story. It was the book series. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. But I'm just explaining my discomfort with the fact that I'm sitting there waiting to see what happens, and all of a sudden she's just sitting for a couple episodes until Dany gets.
And you're right. I'm not saying that she doesn't do that because there's that scene when Jaime walks into the map that she had painted on the ground, which is a really good set piece, a great shot, which is, you can say that about so much about this show. The production value is incredible. Where they have that moment, and it always feels like Cersei's just kind of the third or fourth main character in season 8.
Yeah,
until
she wasn't.
Last couple episodes. She
wasn't dangerous then, and then when the Night King died, she really wasn't dangerous at all either. She wasn't really the main antagonist, and she shouldn't have been. They should have focused on the Night King being the antagonist and have Cersei be the subplot and subterfuge between Dany becoming queen of Westeros. That's what they should have done.
Well, they did have that. I mean, but it was layered though, right? Because now and this is my problem with season 8, because since we're in it, there were too many. They had to tie up the ends of the big bads. We had the Night King, and we had the army, and then we had Cersei, and we had Daenerys. And so Daenerys was involved in both of those things, obviously. And we only had 8 episodes, right? I'm thinking, hang on.
There's 13. There's 13 episodes between season 7 and season 8.
Right, but there's only 6 episodes in season 8.
Right.
So 6 episodes, you have to wrap up 2 biggest bads you've created in this decade-long show, right? So that's a lot to do. So I in that case, yes, we felt Cersei was the back player from the first 3 episodes, and then all of a sudden she was the fourth from the last 3. But I will say this about Dany. I loved her transformation, and it's funny. I wanted to check this quote before we started. She has they have a quote and I had Jessica find this for her. She gracefully did. When Cersei's talking to Dinklage's character, she says that anytime a Targaryen is born, the gods flip a coin, right? And so for the most part of this 8 episode or 8 season show, she's been on. We see her side, her point of view, but all of a sudden on I think it's on the Last of the Starks. I'm sorry, in the Bells. All of a sudden, everything that happens starts to fuel her. And honestly, I gotta say, dude, like I completely agree with her motivation. Like I mean, but again, I'm a Shane guy, right? Everybody knows that. I'm a Shane guy from Walking Dead. Last time I'll bring up Walking Dead, I promise. So her motivation to torch, her idea to torch the city, who has fucked her entire family and lineage for so long and been shitty people for forever. It's like cool. It's like the same prospect of like, hey, we're gonna nuke this city because of all the shitty things that your government has done, right?
But
so No, go ahead. I'm wrapping that one up.
She constantly says that she's not going to. And here, I have two weeks to the last season, one episode, and then the whole season, and I'll go into it as well. If you take out the bells before she goes nuts, you take out the fact that Cersei's going to ring the bells and surrender, which she does. Jaime does it and talks about doing it. If you take out that part, then I'm okay with it. Okay? But the fact of the matter is that Cersei does surrender, and then Dany goes off. That was poorly executed. We got no depth from her destroying the city. You never saw any of her reaction while she's burning women and children. Not to mention the fact that Arya almost dies practically 8 freaking times when it happens, and we keep cutting to her for some freaking reason. We see her burning. Oh, no, she's not dead. Oh, she got on a horse. Oh, she's back. It never made any sense. There's no depth there's no reaction. That's the cool thing about action. You get the reaction and the action of characters that they happen. It didn't happen when she's burning down. If you take out the fact that Cersei did not surrender, if she didn't, and she was still resilient against Dany, then I'm on board for it. Then that switch makes sense. It was poorly executed. All the fans agree with that. I know you don't, but I'm sorry. If you take out the fact,
say all the fans agree with it, Nate, because you don't speak for all the Game of Thrones fans. You can say the
chat. In the chat,
with it.
Who agreed with Dany going nuts right there? Let's go with that right now. That's an audience I can control right now.
I'll post it on Twitter, Nate, and I'll see if more people agree in the chat or on Twitter, and we'll see what they say. So we'll do that. But what I would say, you had another point to say before I come back to yours. Go ahead and finish up your point. Other than this is me.
Cersei and the Night King are supposed to be the big bads of the show. They didn't end with the White Walkers. I'm going to get into my season 8 rewrite and how they should have ended it in a little bit. But Arya killing the Night King would be like Jon killing Cersei. It doesn't make sense. See the subplot, see the core values of the characters and stuff like that too. The way she killed the Night King was stupid. How did she jump over 8 freaking White Walkers plus his whole army? And then what professional assassin who took out all the Freys and stuff like that screams when she jumps and stabs? Yeah. Pulled me out of the catharsis of that. Cersei dying the way she did, it was anticlimactic. It just lost its climax of the scene and stuff like that too. At that point, they tried making Dany the villain way too quickly, so we lost the core values of the actual 2 main bads that we thought were going to be bad. And then you have this woman that all of a sudden she's the bad person. We have to kill her somehow by a husk of a character, Jon Snow, who for a whole season all he can say is, "You're my queen. I don't want it." What?
It's the meme king. That's so true for that whole. It's like that. Choose your answer. You've got 3. You got 3. Choose your. What is it? Yeah, you're my queen. I don't want it, and there's something else. I forget, but that's hilarious.
That's literally his 2 lines. If you look at it, I went through the season last night. I didn't watch it all because I'm watching. I'm literally on the episode where they go north of the wall, but literally those are his only lines for 3 episodes at least. I'll give you the bare minimum. Stupid. Yeah. And yes, Perry's right. Arya learns to become one of the most badass assassins, secret assassins, all of fantasy history, and she uses that to get revenge on the Freys once, and that's it. That's it. She becomes the Punisher, and then we're done with it. But yeah.
I love that. I just real quick. I love that episode. That episode was awesome when the dad's eating his kid's toe or something like that. When I love that reveal. That was such a cool.
Not to mention the fact that I'm going to go back on the writers a little bit. Their excuse for the reason why Rhaegal gets shot out of the air by the Euron split is that she forgot. That right there is stupid writing. They wrote that episode, so they have no excuse. And that was just stupid. How did she forget that they're out there? Let's just fly the dragons really close to the water. You're on a dragon. You can see. You're in the air. How do you not see boats and stuff in front of you? Stupid. Stupid payoff.
Yeah, you're right. But I do think that trope is used a lot in most things. Where if we're doing production, someone's standing right off camera, and you whip the camera, and they're there the whole time. So yeah, I get it.
You can't just throw that veil in front of me and say they forgot when she can obviously see she's on the back of a dragon, and we don't get any payoff from her seeing her dragon get killed. It's like 1 second. If you scroll down, it's 1 second of her looking back going, oh.
Well, okay, yeah, okay. I don't remember it that well, and again, I haven't seen that episode in a while, but I'm sure there was some emotional involvement with that. So I know that during forget what episode it is when the Ice King kills the other dragon, there's some emotion on her there.
Yeah, they did that right. They did that well. They built that up. You saw it coming. There was tension building and stuff like that. We got the reaction of Daenerys and all the characters seeing this gorgeous creature just getting killed immediately by the biggest bad that they've seen. They're afraid. There was nothing with Rhaegal getting shot out of the sky by Euron. Nothing.
Well, I wonder if that was a cutting point, like the end of the season type of thing, like or the end of the episode, your slam, or it's like boom, lights out type of thing, and then it's meant for shock value, where the audience just kind of resonates on it, like when Jon comes back to life, like when he's sitting there stabbed, we just see his eyes open, right? So there's no moment of like, hey, that just could have been a creative choice, and that didn't rub me obviously the wrong way like it rubbed you. I will 100% agree that I think that the way Cersei died was bullshit.
Exactly.
I think we deserved way more than that. But by proxy, that's how Jaime died. So like, to me, that was the two biggest misses. I don't have as many problems with season 8 as most people do, but because again, I just enjoyed it for what it was. I wasn't trying to, you know what I mean? I didn't. So whatever. But I think the biggest problem I had with it was the way they killed Jaime and Cersei. In fact, I was to the point where I thought there's no fucking way she died this way. I even think that she felt that way because on her Instagram the next day, she wrote this very like emotional farewell to the character.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I thought that was very, very cool. And I'm thinking, well, she's really setting this up. So when she comes back from this episode, people are really gonna believe it. But no, man, and I couldn't agree more. I disagree with a lot about what you're saying on season 8. But the fact that the way they killed Cersei and the way they killed Jaime was bullshit. That really fucking rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I agree. So, chat.
Before you get into your rewrite, I want to tell you what I thought season 8 did well.
I was just about to say, I want you to say what it is, and then chat. Message me in the chat right here if you want to hear what my rewrite is after Chris talks about what he thinks season 8 did well.
So, season 8 there were a couple episodes in season 8 specifically that I really, really enjoyed. One of them was A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. And you mentioned it before when they're kind of sitting around talking, they're saying this is the last night we're going to be live. And there was some real emotional stories that came out of that. And I feel like maybe that's what was missing from this season a little bit, because everybody knew that they had 6 episodes to wrap up something that was going for a decade long. It's a tough order to do. We had one episode that was an hour and a half, 2 episodes that were an hour and 20, and one episode that was an hour and 19. So they were basically like watching movies at this point. And so for me, A Night of the Seven Kingdom was wonderful. We have, again, you mentioned it before.
Chat, we're talking about the wine and chill scene where everybody's talking around the fire.
Yeah, that's right. And so, thank you. Sorry about that. And it's where Jaime knights Brienne, and they have that moment.
That was beautiful.
Wasn't it? I thought that was so good.
She smiled, dude. I lit up from that. That was beautiful.
That was such a great point. And so, going in from that episode, you have these really good feelings about, I like these characters. They just emotionally unveiled themselves to me. They haven't, for the last 7 seasons. We got a really open view of people that we didn't think would be in the same room are now kind of contemplating that tomorrow they're all going to die, or even later that night. So we end with that, and we open with the longest episode of the entire series.
1 hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah. And a lot of people have problems with it because of the darkness. I didn't. It didn't bother me. Let me just put that out there now. People will shit on it because they couldn't see it.
You're the only person that's ever told me that.
That it's not been too dark?
That it wasn't too dark.
It wasn't too dark.
I know that you're the only person that's ever said that to me.
Well, that's why it's good we're friends, isn't it? So no, this was such an awesome scene. You have that long track, and you have that awesome get up where Melisandre lights all the Dothraki swords on fire, and before each one, you've got these pockets of these characters that you really enjoy. You've got Jorah, you've got Brienne, you've got Jaime, you've got pockets of people that are going to get attacked and are probably going to die, and so. It's like a war movie. I know they didn't, but you didn't know that. I mean, in episode 3, again, think about at the time what you expected. In season 3, in episode 3, you knew there were only 3 episodes left, right? So you got to figure that some of these characters are going to get cleaved off, and Jorah did. I mean, Jorah was one of my favorite characters of the entire series, and I will say this: for all the missteps they had with Cersei and Jaime, Jorah's ending was perfect. It was absolutely perfect in my opinion. And so they did that right. I love this fight. Episode 2, episode 3 were awesome. And then the bells. I mean, I know you don't like it, and probably a lot of people don't, but fuck it, who cares? I saw Daenerys's flip and turn made complete sense to me. Like, okay, cool. These people have been, stepping on other people for the rest of for forever, and you're this like, I don't know, this great rise up, and you've got dragons. Like, you know what? Fuck everybody. I'm gonna put you in the same place that you put other people. Again, I'm a scorched earth kind of guy. Not to, if you didn't know that. So for me to see her do that, even if they surrendered, so what? If a surrendering army that had been dominant, and Grey Worm says it, the Grey Worm gets into there. It's like, hey, they've shit on people for decades. Why should we take any mercy on them now?
Okay, true, but I agree with the fact that all of a sudden you see all the Dothraki die in the first part, and then the next episode, oh, we only lost half. Where was the other half? Like, there was stuff like
they made it.
No, they didn't. They all died. The only people that came back were Ghost and Jorah. The whole Dothraki army got torched. That's the first thing you see. They're all lighting up on the fire and stuff like that. They go out and they're gone. And all of a sudden, the next episode, we have half the Dothraki still in the show. Doesn't make any sense. The fact that the characters that they should have died, you see them. The cutting was jarring. If you rewatch it again, the only thing that's actually a full take is when Arya's up there, Deus Machina fighting like White Walkers the best out of anybody, even though she's never seen or fought them before. And that was stupid.
Well,
she gets saved.
The cuts have always been jarring, though.
Not really. I'm just saying, I'm just saying the cutting for that scene alone itself, that was jarring. You see main characters getting wiped or taken down by zombies that are just hugging them. In the very beginning, you set up the stage that these zombies, the whites, are terrifying. They take out the Dothraki, this huge wall. Then all of a sudden, when they get close, they're just hugging the main characters, and they're just getting at them, or they're just dogpiling them. They're not killing them.
I think that's the implication of them, like, killing them and taking them down, not to be so, like, I need to rip their face off or stab them or whatnot. I think once they get tackled, that's implied that they've then been stormed over and therefore are dead. That's probably why they did that.
Well,
if it didn't read you, I get it.
It just didn't make any sense to me.
If it didn't read, it's okay. It's fine. But that's what I liked. You kick us off for what you didn't like, because I think we're gonna settle in for this one.
No, I've already gone over everything that I didn't like. I feel like I drove that into the ground pretty well.
How would you redo it?
Okay, here we go.
Let me give you your lead in.
Here we go. How I would rewrite season 8. Okay. They lose the Battle of Winterfell. The show started with the White Walkers and the Night King. It should end that same way. He was the big bad, not Cersei, not all the other shit that they had piling up as well. They lose the Battle of Winterfell. It happens pretty much the same way. The Dothraki go out and they get slaughtered in the very beginning. Okay, Theon dies with protecting Bran. Jorah dies protecting Dany. That's still great. It ends those character arcs in a beautiful way as well too. Theon finally getting the gumption to rise up and do something to protect somebody. He didn't have to be there. He could have stayed with the Iron Islands with Yara. He comes back. Okay? No crypt. That was stupid writing. Peter Dinklage even said in an interview, why would we put the families, the kids, and all the women into the crypt where there's a guy that can literally raise people from the dead? That was stupid. You put them in the hall, the castle itself. That's where you put them. You make it like Helm's Deep was, where you have the emotions and the depth of the characters and the fact that they might all die. You see that from like that point of view. Okay? The dragons are trying to take out the White Walkers in the air with fire, and they're trying to find the Night King. The Night King's holding back as well. He's trying to control everything the same way it happens. Jon sees what's happening. They're losing the battle, so he leaves Dany to go and protect the people. That's always what he's been. Give him a little bit back of what his core value was like, how he was on the wall and stuff like that too. He flies down there. He gets knocked out of the sky because the Night King attacks him. So he goes down. He's on the ground. He's fighting. Rhaegal dies at Winterfell, protecting the people, besides some stupid thing in the air over Euron's fleet. He dies protecting the Horde. You see Theon, who's killed by the Night King by Jon. You see that fight take place. Bran is warding. You don't know what he's doing. He's in the tree and stuff like that too. That's fine. That's okay with that. Dany has knocked the Night King off his dragon just like they did in the show. Falls down into the Godswood where Bran is. That makes more sense than him just walking through with a whole horde and stuff like that too. He gets there. You finally see what they've been leading up to the fact. The Night King and Jon go toe to toe. We've been waiting for that to happen. It should have happened this way as well too. Jon, the leader of the Night's Watch and stuff like that too, has been fighting and been warning people about the Night King. They go to fight. Jon is overmatched. The Night King is still tough. You see that fight go on. Viserion shows up, the dead dragon. Jon's about to be killed. Bran wargs into Viserion. Something that he can do. He can go into animals and stuff like that too. Why not? Why couldn't he control a dead dragon? That makes more sense than him just warging into crows and stuff like that, and not doing anything in the fight. He wargs into Viserion to protect Jon. The fire doesn't work against the Night King, just like it did in the show. Breathes on the Night King. The Night King's not damaged. The Night King kills Viserion with Bran warged into the dragon. It does something to Bran. He's not able to break out of it. He gets killed inside of Viserion, but he's still alive. His body's still alive. We just don't know where his mind is at. Jon tries the dragonglass dagger that we saw from season 7, so he stabs the Night King in the back. That doesn't work. That's surprising. The Night King, why can't he die? I'll get into that, the reason why later. Jon tries the dragonglass, it doesn't kill him. They have to retreat. I'm not going to get to every character, it's too much, but they have to retreat from Winterfell. Back down the King's Road. You don't have all this Deus Machina going back to the whole plot process after Winterfell and all the boring stuff that happened after that too. They go back to King's Landing, and they can't wake up Bran. He's still in his three-eyed raven stare. They can't get him out of the stare. Cersei meets them all. There's no Dothraki. There's barely any Unsullied. You have Jon. You have Dany. Jorah's dead. Theon is dead. They have Bran. I didn't go into any other characters because I didn't think that they didn't need to be involved at that point. Okay, so they go back. Cersei will let them in only if Dany bends the knee to her. So, to make Dany's sacrifice the ultimate sacrifice, because she's always talked about wanting to do what's best for the people, she does. She makes that ultimate sacrifice and bends the knee to Cersei to save everybody, because the Night King and his army is coming. They all need to hold up in King's Landing. That's where the battle should be. Just like in Return of the King. You make this huge fight. You make it amazing. You make it a big climax battle. Okay? She comes in. The Night King comes with his army. And Winter is here. Winter is finally at King's Landing. Winter got over in like one night in the show. This time, he freezes everything. The water, where the Iron Fleet is on. You see the Dothraki show up as undead Dothraki. You get the horses undead and stuff like that too. They attack the fleet. They're running over the water and stuff like that because it's frozen now, and dead horses and stuff. And they attack the Euron's fleet. That whole fleet gets destroyed. You have one last dragon because Viserion's dead. You have Drogon. Rhaegal dies protecting the people in the hall. Bran wakes up at that point, and he says, "There's only one way we can kill the Night King. The Dragon Class won't work. Valyrian Steel won't work. What holds the powers of Westeros? What is the one thing? What is the magical thing that they never touched on? The God trees, the weirwood trees, the bleeding trees. There is one in King's Landing. It's the first one. If you look back in the books and stuff like that, it's the first one. The only way you can kill the Night King is you have to destroy the tree. That'll sever all magic. But that's the only way you can kill the Night King, because he was sacrificed by the children of the forest with a piece of dragonglass. That's why it didn't work in his heart. It's the only way you can do it. You have to burn down the tree. Dany has to burn the first one that they made in King's Landing. And if she does, though, here's the twist. If she burns down the tree, Jon dies. Because he is brought back with magic. So that's a twist. That's the sacrificial part of the Fire and Ice saga. She doesn't want Jon to die because she's pregnant. She has his lineage going through her. She doesn't want to lose the father because she grew up with the father. She knows what that does to children and stuff like that too. Jon goes with her. They're all fighting. Everybody's dying. They're losing the battle. They go to the Godswood. The Night King gets there, and Jon's trying to hold him off. He still can't beat him. Jon is just badly, he's broken pretty much. The dragon's being attacked by the whites and stuff like that too. Dany grabs his sword and becomes Lightbringer and stabs the Night King and pins him to the tree. And in her last breath, she yells out to Dracarys, to burn it down, because she can't burn. That's the whole point. Make this reason why she can't burn a real thing. She can't burn. They burn down the tree. The Night King dies. The whites all start dying, even though King's Landing's falling down. While this is happening, Jaime has found Cersei. They go to the tunnel like Tyrion said. They're trying to flee. Here's a really great twist, Chris, and I think you're really going to like this. They go to the tree. He's taking her down to the tunnel to flee. Elora Sand, Oberyn's partner, breaks out. You saw her, that she was in the prison, that's it. She breaks out. She stabs Jaime. So you bring back that twist. She stabs Jaime. Cersei's freaking out. Jaime's freaking out because he's just been stabbed. Takes off the mask. It's Arya using Jaime's face, who just got stabbed by Elora Sand. It's a twist right there. Brings back the Elora and the Dornish side and stuff like that too. Arya just got stabbed, doing something, a punishment. What happens? Consequences bring punishment in this story. Arya's just now been stabbed by Elora Sand. Jaime shows up because he went there, but it wasn't actually Jaime wrong. It was always Arya trying to pretend to be Jaime to get close to Cersei because she was on her list. She never gave up on that. You have the Mountain and the Clegane Bowl. That's fine. That's okay. That's all going on. Jaime now takes Cersei and they run. The kingdom's closing. Dany's without any, but she doesn't have any of her dragons. Jon Snow's dead. Everybody else is dead. And the last defiant act, Cersei says, and then she sees that the battle is won, and she calls for everybody that's loyal to Dany to be killed. That includes Tyrion. Tyrion's still there as well too. Jaime, bringing back his arc full circle, strangles Cersei to save everybody else. Because he sees the madness in his sister. He makes the ultimate choice like he did in the very, very beginning to make him the actual hero.
Yeah, the King's Son. Yeah.
That's how. And then Dany's the last one. She's there. She's pregnant. Tyrion says, "You are the queen. You have an heir." Everybody bows. Cut to black. That's the end. Now we get something that Game of Thrones has never done. We have a time jump. You're in the Crypts of Winterfell. Fast forward. You're at Lyanna, Eddard Stark. You see everybody else, and you see Jon. And on the plaque, it reads, "Jon Targaryen of House Stark." You see a little boy in front, and you hear a voice that says, "Jon, come. It's time to leave." And Jon leaves, and he runs up to his mom, which is Dany, with Ghost. And Jon, who could have warged if they brought that into it, maybe Jon's still in the Ghost inside of his direwolf, we don't know, and leave Winterfell. That's how I would have rewrote season 8.
Well, that's a nice piece of fan fiction. That's not bad, Nate. You do a lot for the characters that are there. So, but yeah, that's a good job. I can tell you spent some time on that. I can tell you've looked into it and researched the characters. And
took me. I went over this for 3 weeks, man. I tried making this as a twist and still playing to the subplots and to the freaking folklore of Game of Thrones, making it a little more interesting. You know, we had. I think that would have been a better payoff. You've gotten Bran actually doing something meaningful. You get the twist of Arya and stuff like that with the faceless man. You get the fact that you bring back Dany that she can't burn. Why can't she burn? Sure. This brings this back as well too. You get the reason why the Night King is there. You have the payoff of this huge battle. I didn't go into every character. I just went into the main plots to make it a little bit better and pay it off at the end.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's. I think everybody at some point has had some iteration of where they could have taken season 8, and they've got like, well, if you did this different, then it might be, you know. But yeah, man. So well, I appreciate your time and dedication to that because it's an interesting story for sure. I mean, I can see it playing out in my head because I'm so adept at seeing those characters and whatnot. Yeah. So I
thank
cool.
you. I feel like that would have been better, and I mean, that's just my take. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there, but I feel like that would have been a lot more interesting to see than Bran not doing anything. And then him becoming king, when, like, the last season he says, "I can't be a lord of anything," and then at the very end he just trolls everybody. He's like, "Why do you think I came all this way? Because I want to be the king." Get out of here. That was the dumbest thing.
I agree. I 100% agree about that. So no, I agree with some of your points on season 8. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't my favorite at all. It wasn't season 4 was my favorite. But there were some really good gems. I mean, if you can say half of a season, half of the episodes in a season are really good, then what's the metric of saying in that season is good? Like, you know what I mean? So how do you validate that? Because for me, again, I really enjoyed 3 episodes from season 8, which had a total of 6 episodes. So, you know, was it terrible? No. I don't shit on it like a lot of other people do, and I know a lot of people do. So I know I'm in the minority on that part. again, I enjoyed it for what it was. It was great. It was career defining for so many of these actors. You know, I mean, Kit Harington found his wife doing the show. I think that's a great story. I mean, Amelia Clark, granted, she hasn't had any knockout roles since then, but I don't think that's her fault.
It's sad. She's been called the franchise killer now, man.
Well, that's ridiculous. Why? Because she did Terminator? Terminator was bullshit because she got
Terminator and Star Wars because of how bad Solo was come out too. I mean, I don't hold up to that. I don't believe in it, but that's literally what she's been called online. It's horrible.
Yeah, the stories of Solo are really something because honestly, I was following that as it was happening because I just went to LA, and how they treated those directors and how they casted that lead actor. I don't know if you knew, and I'm not gonna linger on this for much longer, but the lead actor for Solo, they had to bring in acting lessons for him to kind of be better at what he was trying to do or what they wanted, which is, you know, you kind of fault her for that. But I like Amelia Clark. I mean, as far as what's her name? Cersei. I can't think of her name right now. What's the actress's name for play Cersei?
Lena Headey.
Thank you. She's been that was probably the greatest, and I can't speak for her, but as a fan, that's probably the greatest role she's ever played.
I liked her in 300.
Yeah, but she was in 300 for like 10 minutes. I mean, yeah, I liked her in 300 too, but like that's probably not something she has on top of her resume. Yeah. You know, so and she was good in Dredd. You know, the remake of the Judge Dredd film.
She was actually Sarah Connor in the Sarah Connor
Chronicles, which was criminally underrated. But yeah, and look at Kit Harington. You know, a lot of these actors, Kit Harington had to go to rehab afterwards. Stress.
Dude, he even in an interview, he's like, somebody asked him like, "Hey, what would you wrap up the season 8? In one word, what would you think?" He literally said, "Disappointing."
He said that.
Yep. Half the actors in one of these interviews, even Peter Dinklage, like, why I was taking dumb pills throughout the whole last season. Tyrion was not doing anything to the plot. He wasn't making any decisions he should have been making or giving any kind of advice. And Kit Harington is just like, he got sad in the table read, but they just destroyed his character. They didn't give him any lines or anything. Like, he came back from the dead, and what was his point of coming back from the dead? Just to kill Daenerys at the end. That made no sense. You know.
I 100% agree. I agree.
I think the show is amazing. Season 1 through 4 is probably the best of the show. And I think we have some guests. I think Lit Boy Pro wanted to come on and speak. I think Perry had some as our guests wanted to join in as well too. So if you guys want to join in the Discord, please feel free. But that's my accomplishments and my failures for the show, and how I would rewrite season 8. Chris, do you have any ending points you want to bring up?
No, man. Honestly, I'm always excited to go back and watch something that was decade defining. You know what I mean? Even if it's, you know, we talked about how Breaking Bad really kind of stuck the landing, right? But a lot of Decker fucking failed terribly. Failed terribly. A lot of these shows that were wonderful can't stick the landing, and that's, think about the pressure that these two dudes had and whatnot. So I'm in no way making excuses for them, but I will definitely say that for us to talk about this show, to go back and revisit some of the iconic moments that are in there, no, it's been a real treat, and I get it. Season 8 wasn't by any stretch great for sure, but no, man, I enjoyed our conversation. I see your point. I like that we have different points of views, but no, man, it's fun, and I can't say anything else than what we've already talked about for the season and for season 8 especially. Yeah. So no, we're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel it, man. I feel it. Perry, Lit Boy Pro, did you want to join us in Discord and say any of your ending thoughts, point of views, likes or dislikes before we wrap up here? I'm just gonna let that sink in. Sure, bring me in. Okay, let me see if I can do this. Chris, I think I might lose you in Discord on video just for 5 seconds here.
It's okay. No worries.
Okay, I'm also watching the stream, obviously.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate your support.
Yeah. But I've muted the stream because I'm sure there's going to be a terrible, weird delay when that happens. Hi,
Perry. What's going on? This is Chris. Chris is Perry. Perry and I go way back. He introduced me.
Nice to meet you, Chris. Yeah.
He introduced me to my favorite book series, The Dresden Files, when I was still a senior in high school.
Oh boy. Awesome. We should do an episode on that, considering that 2 books came out just recently.
2020. Yep, that was the best thing about 2020.
And also, yes, very quickly, Dredd is awesome, and Carl Urban killed that role.
Yes.
I highly recommend that as like a modern proto cyberpunk movie.
Big time.
But I won't linger on that either. So yeah, I've known Nate quite some time now, and as Nate well knows, I am a huge nerd. I mean, just about as deep and as big into the nerd sphere as it gets. Comic Cons, I watch anime, I watch all the fantasy, sci-fi TV. I love all this stuff. I read all the books. I am a big fan of everyone nerding the way that they want to nerd. I'm not huge on the whole. One thing I don't like about the Game of Thrones and Star Wars fan bases is how rabid and gatekeepy they can be.
Yes, thank you.
But I also don't want to spend a bunch of time on that either. I appreciate, Chris, by the way, that you have what is clearly the minority, in my opinion, the minority viewpoint of season 8 was not that bad. I find myself in that similar minority viewpoint in a lot of things. For example, for Solo, I think Solo is really not that bad. I like
Me
Solo.
too.
Just fine. But I'm really more with Nate on this particular subject. I think season 8 was a rough outing for Game of Thrones, and I have a lot of positive things to say about the series as a whole, and even a few specific positive things to say about season 8. But I think sort of on the whole, I'd view it as a negative ending to an otherwise really positive experience.
100%.
To sum up, and I don't want to eat up all of your guys' time with all of my
No,
thoughts.
dude, take your time, dude. Honestly,
No, we're wrapping up here, so please, no, this is how we bring our guests in. We want to hear your guys' point of views, and might touch back on some of the things we said and some things left unsaid. Go ahead.
Sure. So, I'm a frequenter of Reddit, and one of the Reddits I frequent is the Game of Thrones subreddit and the Game of Thrones meme subreddit, which arguably has better.
That is awesome stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
I looked at some of that stuff this morning.
Yeah, but and I think I agree with a lot of the points that both of you made, and certainly I was in chat chatting about my thoughts on quite a few of the plot points. I think for me the biggest the biggest signifier of the problems I had. Well, you know what? Let's start with the positives. We'll do the positives first to start on a high note, and then we'll just really push that into the dirt. So, Game of Thrones as a whole, I think, was a renaissance for fantasy television. We've had other fantasy television. Most of it's tanked. We had a Dresden Files TV show that.
Let's not bring that up.
I actually liked it. That's also probably a minority opinion. We had a Legend of the Seeker TV show, which is based on Terry Goodkind's Sword of Truth series. That tanked in one.
Yep.
Yeah, it's bad.
We had Shannara Chronicles 2 years ago too.
Yes. Yeah, the Shannara Chronicles show was all right. It was not great. We had Shadowhunters, which is based off of Cassandra Clare's her Mortal Instruments series. Game of Thrones is the only fantasy show, I think, in the last decade that really put fantasy back on the map as a viable, long-running, take it seriously. This is not a joke experience.
It was the biggest thing, dude. Everyone wanted to watch it. Everybody was involved. Everybody was, it was everywhere. Right. People were taking, there was like bets about who was going to die. It went viral. It was crazy.
I think the next closest thing might be Supernatural, but that's not a terribly serious show. It's a...
Yep, we talked about that last week in our favorite TV show stuff. Chris still has to watch the episodes I gave him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's right.
Supernatural is great and it has its serious moments, but it is overall a feel-good, semi-comedic adventure kind of story. Whereas Game of Thrones bills itself, I think, appropriately as a dark fantasy.
Kirby,
and that's
the first
one
person I was expecting a lot more from
give
people
me
doing
the
that.
Saving Private Ryan of fantasy, and Game of Thrones is like, we're not quite that brutal, but we're close. So
I love that analogy, by the way. That's spot on.
And I think TV is missing a lot of that.
Absolutely.
A lot of that, like, fantasy and science fiction can be these vehicles for serious conversation. And be serious in and of themselves. So that's like, for me, that's the big thing that Game of Thrones contributed to sort of our collective consciousness.
Absolutely. Yeah, I chalked that up to the book series because the dialogue in there was just amazing. Everybody had this plots you didn't know who. Like I said in the very beginning, season 1 was a mystery. You didn't know who the bad guy was.
Right.
Who was killing people.
Right. Yeah, and you knew that nobody was safe, and that leads me into my first gripe with season 8. We stopped feeling like nobody was safe. And I mean that in the sense that, like, the Battle of Winterfell, I was not worried about who was going to die. Because I genuinely thought they were only going to kill off 1 or 2 minor characters. Like Jorah. I thought maybe Jorah would die. Or something like that. Like, I was not afraid that Bran was going to die. I was not afraid that Jon was going to die. I was not afraid that Dany was going to die. I was not afraid that Arya was going to die.
Yeah.
Those characters, I needed to feel like one of them could die.
I thought Varys was going to die, to be honest. That was my top list.
And Varys' end is not great either.
No, it's horrible. I didn't even touch on that.
Yeah. But but if they had killed Varys at the Battle of Winterfell, that would have been fine, but it also would have still not really shaken anything up. If you kill one of those big 5 characters I mentioned that I was not worried that was going to die, I think you get back a little bit some of that, like, that deadly magic of seasons 1 through 4, where really important people could just off. I mean, like, murdering Robb Stark at the Red Wedding was the biggest choice this show made, and it was an extremely good one.
Yeah,
because everyone.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that we don't have that in 7 and 8, in season 7 and 8, and so that's one of my bigger gripes with it.
Dude, the best death in the Long Night, I didn't touch on. I'm so sorry to interrupt. Was Lyanna Mormont. She killed a giant. That was huge. That was the best. That was the best conflict in that show. Just the way she went out, like, and she was a fan favorite. Everybody, when she got knocked away by the giant, everybody was freaking out and stuff like that too. That was huge. That was probably the craziest thing. Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, and Lyanna Mormont's an awesome character. What a great character
That's why that actress in the beginning, the Ellie part in Last of Us. That's kind of what's catapulted her to get that. Which
I am looking forward to, because I think Last of Us could also be another kind of, like, serious fantasy, science fiction, but, like, you know, that gives us some serious energy as opposed to some, jokey haha.
Yeah.
I think the other disservice that season 8 did, because earlier you said the production value is amazing. I agree with that. Production value is amazing, but I think you can lose the forest through the trees on production value. You can start seeing these amazing set pieces, these cool gimmicks and things that you're blowing your CGI budget on, or your extras budget on, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you want to put on this big show, but you lose the value of what Game of Thrones really always brought, which was characters and character development. And you don't need any production value for that. What you need is a okay script, not even an amazing script, but an okay script that can justify its choices. And so you can't, if you can't, what's the phrase? Like, if you can't win them over with facts, baffle them with bullshit. I felt like that's what we got out of season 8, right? They were like, well, like, writing's really hard, guys. Like, writing is so hard, man. And just, like, we have to, like, come up with our own shit when we do, hey, CGI, you gotta get me out of this box I wrote myself into. Can you do that? And they're like, yeah, man, we'll just whip up this dragon or whatever. Like, we'll call it good. And, all credit to the production design team and all of them for what they were, the steaming pile of shit they had to turn into a $200 million show that they were handed. But what they could have done is they could have taken $1 million out of that production value and given it to a competent writer or team of writers. You probably don't need to pay. I mean, they should get paid $1 million, but you probably don't need to pay one writer $1 million. You get a whole team, and they could have written us even remotely a better justification. Like, you could have ended every single character arc in this season in the same exact way, but given us 3 extra episodes that justify the choices they make. And I think you have a season that is 3 times as good as it is, or at least like an acceptable end to an otherwise excellent journey. You know, I'm never going to love how Cersei and Jaime died.
No,
or
nobody should. Yeah.
Or how the Night's King's arc ends, the lack of justification for his motivations, the magic, etc., etc., etc. You know, I'm never really going to love the endings that they chose, but I think you could have sold them to me a lot more effectively. I'm an attorney and a professor in my work, an attorney by day and a professor by night. And one of the things I tell my students, and one of the things I talk about a lot with other oral advocates, is you can sell me anything if you say it right.
Sure.
True.
And I think that the biggest problem I had with season 8 was that they didn't sell me. They told me I had to buy it whether I liked it or not. And I sure didn't fucking like it. You know, I agree. Danny going crazy and burning down King's Landing is not in and of itself a bad ending to that story, right? But
if the execution was there.
If the execution was there. So it's not that we had intrinsically a bad concept for this season. It's that we had no way of being convinced that it should happen this way. You guys are probably familiar with the phrase verisimilitude, right?
Yes.
Which is the concept of internal consistency to your universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that, like, you know, gravity still works in a fantasy world even if you have magic, right? And so if you're going to break gravity, we have to have a reason to break gravity. You can't just say, gravity's turned off for this episode, right? And that's what they broke. They broke the verisimilitude of Game of Thrones, which is that the characters act semi-rationally, and when they're irrational, there's a rational reason for them to be irrational.
Right. The core point of that would be Tyrion. Like, he didn't do anything at all in the last couple episodes.
Right. Tyrion's a mover and a shaker. I mean, he's a serious influencer on policy in Westeros, and he's got the ear of many valuable and important people, and he has well established to be willing to take advantage of that to both his and his objectives' benefit. He does none of that in season 8, really. He makes quips. I mean, he drinks and he knows things. That's all he does.
And the fact that he constantly keeps saying, I can reason with Cersei. She wanted you dead for, like, the whole show, not to mention that she still blames you for her son, her father, and her mother's death. What makes you think that you can reason with her or even talk her down? And the only thing that saves him is his plot armor on how many times she has the ability of killing him. He even says, just do it. Go ahead and do it. And she doesn't.
I mean, this is a man who shot his own father on the toilet with a crossbow.
Yeah.
And, like, Tywin is eminently more reasonable than Cersei ever was. And yeah, that's a situation that, like, where we're not sure that Tyrion had much of a choice, and or he probably hated Tywin more than he hates Cersei. But he doesn't really hate Tywin so much more than he hates Cersei that I don't think he wouldn't shoot Cersei on the toilet with a crossbow also. Yeah. But his attitude towards her is entirely different, and it doesn't seem to be justified in any way. She was torturous to him also through most of his upbringing. At least, you know, Tywin was a neglectful father.
Yep.
Cersei's outright mean to Tyrion. And
how many times does she have the chance of killing Tyrion and all that saved him his plot armor? Like, she on the wall 3 times meeting him and stuff like that too. It just didn't track with either of those characters.
You know, and I think you have just the number of problems with illogical actions by these characters during that season highlights so many of those problems, because you can look at any scene other than the few good ones you've talked about where you go, why didn't any of the characters who were placed in that scene act in any way else? Like, okay, for example, the Daenerys's number 2 female retainer, who is Missandei. Missandei's up on that, like, laughably low wall, and there's, like, you know, ranged troops, and I understand that some of this is the artifice of, like, needing the characters to be physically closer together so you can get everyone on camera, right? But, like, Missandei just lets herself die without resisting at all in that situation, and we know Missandei's, like, a much tougher character, right?
Yeah.
You know, give her some credit that she would, like, Cersei is up there Missandei could have taken her down with her or tried to.
Grabbed her,
Right.
yeah, doing
Grabbed
something.
her, something like that. I don't think Missandei's character would have just, you know, let
Right,
herself
taken it,
die.
yeah.
Yeah,
And-
that was an emotional scene, not only for Danny but Grey Worm as well too. Just
Right,
yeah, it's-
right.
Yeah.
And it's obviously, that scene is obviously meant to set up sort of the Grey Worm and Daenerys' reactions, and like to give us at least, you know, 5% of the justification of Daenerys kind of going crazy and burning the whole city down. But like a big part of Daenerys' character arc is her development from being a naive, I can accomplish anything and do good all the time, leader to a hardened leader who has seen war and the consequences of freeing all the slaves and all of these other things. I mean, she's developed an emotional skin here that we're then told to believe that she would be so easily pierced by the death of a loyal retainer. And I think that that's a little bit strange. Is it impossible that that's true? No.
No,
But
what's
we're not
impo-
given enough to believe it.
What's impossible to know is that she goes up to the city. She doesn't just go up to the Red Keep. She just starts to start wiping out people as opposed to
Right.
villains and stuff like that too. Her army's already in there. I understand taking
Yeah.
out the gate, but she doesn't go automatically to the fortress. She goes to killing people. It didn't make any sense.
Right.
That's why, Chris, that's why I don't agree with the whole point for just attacking the city the way she did. I understand.
But it's not the first time an army has done that. Armies do that all the time.
No, but,
You know,
but
like-
I think there's a difference between the leader using their dragon to do it and the army doing it. Like, it's not
Yeah.
weird for the army to rape and pillage. That's pretty normal, as far as historical context for
That's-
medieval
Yeah,
battles
that's
go.
the point I'm trying to make. Yeah, I agree, Chris. I understand. Like I said, take out the bells and the fact that Cersei surrenders. If you take that out, I can understand what she did. I could understand why if she did that when they originally killed Missandei already. If she just went at them with the dragon, I could get behind that.
I also think it's a little strange that in a situation where she just watched her loyal retainer die, we're meant to believe that she has an emotional break over it, that she doesn't just call up her dragon right then and toast that entire, like, battlement, right? She knows where Cersei is at that moment. She could have taken out the entire leadership of King's Landing in one fell swoop with probably no meaningful reprisal in that situation.
Didn't
You
they
know-
have the scorpions though on the top? Didn't they?
Yeah, the scorpions are
'cause-
their own problem, man.
Yeah,
I-
right.
yeah,
the
you
galley
know,
gun
like-
fucking launching crossbows. Yeah, I get it.
Right, right. You know, if we accept as true that the scorpions are as lethal to the dragons as the show has said they are in that scene with the boats where the dragon dies, then fine. There's an argument there. They say it even earlier in the show, though, that the scorpions can barely touch the dragons. And so it's like very frustrating to me that they're just like, except when it's convenient for the plot,
Right.
for the scorpions to be hyper lethal. You know, and again, it is that attention to detail that is easily solvable with other solutions in the show that you have available to you. That bugs me about the writing for season 8. It's not just bad; it's lazy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think I'll leave it there. I've occupied enough of your time.
Barry,
But
thanks for joining us, bro. I really appreciate
Yeah,
you coming
bro.
in.
Those are awesome points, and that I agree with what you're saying for the most part. But yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I mean,
Great.
it was a great show. Now,
Yes.
you can't downplay the fact that this show brought so many people together. It brought the fact that you can have a science fiction show be more interesting than just armies, swords, and magic. You know,
Right.
the dialogue was amazing. The intrigue was great. It brought the world a new scope to be filled. Like I said, with Amazon's new shows of Lord of the Rings and Wheel of Time coming out and stuff like that too. There's so much more coming out. There's comic books that are being made into shows now too. Why the Last Man, one of my favorite comics, is coming out with it as well too.
Yeah.
You've got Wheel of Time, like I said already. I'm just excited. This opens the world to new possibilities for entertainment.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
set that stage. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Perry, it
Bro,
was a
thank
pleasure
you for
having you on
stopping by.
ReelChat.
That's-
Absolutely,
yeah, man, thank you
please.
so much.
We're going to try and do this every Sunday. I think we'll just have to set up a set time, but I like this time. Chris, if it works for you, awesome. If not, we'll figure out something else. Chris, any closing statements?
No, man. I honestly, it's funny. This is it's rare that a show can create this type of backlash, right? But what that means is you cared about it, and I think that's kind of the biggest takeaway that I have. That yeah, season 8 might not have been great for some people. Some people thought it was mediocre, but what's inarguable is how great the show was. How it ended is something separate, but the show itself, it galvanized people. It brought people together. Like you said, you had viewing parties. I was invited to be. I'm sure Perry had viewing parties. Like everybody watched the show, and like you had to watch it because on Sunday when it came out, if somebody died on Monday, you wanted to know the time it happened, because otherwise you're going to know about it and you're going to have it spoiled. I mean, spoiled more thing than Walking Dead, I promise, ever did. So no,
we wanted to see who was on the throne. We wanted to see who was going to die, who was going to triumph. It was definitely a coming together tale, and a coming together tale not just for the characters in the show, but for people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Chris, this has been a great episode. I'm so glad we did this.
Dude, me too. Yeah, that was good job. And by the way, I loved your piece too, Nate. I thought that you thought about the characters, and I know you put time into it.
Thank you.
You know what? It's just you talking to me in the chat, but I want you to know that I know what work it takes to write something as a writer. So I appreciated you taking the time to kind of talk to us about that and how you would have kind of realigned.
Hey, you have to give props to you, man. I was against talking about Game of Thrones just because of how butthurt I was even years later. I think the day after it aired, I was working at the lounge, and I went off on a rant on YouTube on my personal channel for a good half hour about how I felt about the ending of Game of Thrones. Yeah. But this was amazing. I loved it. ReelChat, this episode on YouTube, and soon SoundCloud, right, Chris?
SoundCloud. We're going to be on Instagram. We're going to be on Twitter. But I think we'll have our SoundCloud. We'll have our first couple of episodes up, I believe, by tomorrow. Imagine that.
Yeah, I'm excited, dude. That's
too.
Amazing. I can't wait. ReelChat's taking off, Chris. Game of Thrones. Thank you, George R. Martin. We are waiting patiently and impatiently for Winds of Winter and Sound of Spring. I think it's the next one, But it's been like 6 years, 8 years going on since the next book, bud. Come on. Bring us our next book. Give us the ending that we want. Don't give us this Dumb and Dumber ending to the show. Give your fans what we want. Finish those books. I can't wait to read them. Rachel's actually listening to them right now on Audible. She's on Game of Thrones, the first book right now too. So
that's awesome.
This was great. I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of your day. Chris,
yes.
This was amazing. Thanks for putting this all together. And this is NAT3MILL and
Chris Carter
on ReelChat. Check us out on YouTube if you haven't watched it here. Thank you so much. You guys all have a wonderful day. Respect yourselves. Respect each other. Take care, guys.